My name is Effie, and at 67 years old, I never expected to be starting over. For decades, my family was everything to me, especially my son James. That Thanksgiving day started with such hope, with turkey roasting and pies cooling on the windowsill of our generational home. I never imagined by evening I'd be wearing that turkey, my son's cruel words ringing in my ears. If you're wondering how a mother ends up selling her home and leaving without a word, that's the story I'm about to share. Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like and subscribe button while I take you back to where it all started. I spent 42 years as a dedicated nurse at Memorial Hospital. Caring for others was my calling. My husband Thomas and I built a beautiful life together in our family home, a charming colonial passed down from my grandparents. The maple trees lining our driveway were planted the day we brought James home from the hospital. For so many years, that house was filled with laughter, holiday gatherings, and the warm comfort of family. Thomas passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack. We had been married for 45 years, and losing him left me adrift. James became my rock during those dark days, calling daily and bringing my grandchildren over every weekend. I treasured those visits with Liam and Grace, who were 9 and 6 at the time. We would bake cookies, plant flowers in the garden, and I would tell them stories about their grandfather. Those early days of widowhood, though painful, were softened by the love of my son and his family. The changes began so gradually, I barely noticed at first. James married Amanda when Liam was just a toddler. Initially, she seemed to appreciate my role in their lives, grateful for the babysitting, home-cooked meals, and financial help whenever they needed it. The house that Thomas and I had paid off decades earlier had appreciated considerably, now worth well over $1.2 million in our growing suburb. Without mortgage payments and with Thomas's life insurance and my pension, I was comfortable financially and delighted to help my family. When James decided to expand his accounting firm 3 years ago, I didn't hesitate to lend him $75,000. "Mom, I'll pay you back as soon as the business takes off," he promised, hugging me tightly. I waved away his promises of repayment. What was mine was his, I thought. I also paid for both grandchildren's private school tuition, wanting to give them the best education possible. The $12,000 per year per child was a stretch, but seeing their bright futures unfold was worth every penny. Last spring, I noticed the first troubling shifts in our relationship. James's calls became less frequent, dropping from daily check-ins to brief weekly conversations that always seemed rushed. Family dinners at my house dwindled from weekly traditions to monthly obligations. When they did visit, Amanda would make subtle comments about the house being too much upkeep for someone your age, or wondering aloud, how much longer you'll be able to manage these stairs. My grandchildren, once eager to spend time with their grandmother, now arrived with their faces buried in tablets and phones. Grace, once my little shadow in the kitchen, would sigh dramatically when I suggested we bake together. Liam would barely look up when I asked about school. The distance growing between us ached like a physical pain. "They're just at difficult ages," my friend Susan reassured me when I confided my concerns. "Teenagers always pull away a bit. They'll come back around." I tried to believe her, adjusting my expectations and finding new ways to connect. I learned about the video games Liam played and the social media Grace was obsessed with. I texted instead of called, sent gift cards instead of hand-knitted sweaters. I was determined to remain relevant in their changing lives. When October arrived and Thanksgiving approached, I threw myself into planning the perfect family gathering. This would be the opportunity to reconnect, to remind them of our family traditions and the love that bound us together. I spent weeks planning the menu, incorporating everyone's favorites. James's beloved sweet potato casserole with the marshmallow topping he'd adored since childhood. Liam's favorite maple-glazed carrots. Grace's double chocolate pecan pie, and of course, Thomas's traditional turkey recipe with his secret herb butter under the skin. The week before Thanksgiving, I cleaned every corner of the house, brought out the good china that had been my mother's, and set the dining room table with the lace tablecloth reserved for special occasions. I polished the silver candle holders that had graced our family table for generations and arranged fresh flowers in the crystal vase Thomas had given me for our 30th anniversary. Every detail was considered, every tradition honored. The day before Thanksgiving, I baked 3 different pies and prepared side dishes that could be easily reheated. I woke at 5 on Thanksgiving morning to prepare the 20-pound turkey, carefully following Thomas's recipe card, yellowed with age and splattered with decades of gravy drippings. As I worked in the kitchen, memories of past Thanksgivings flooded back. Thomas carving the turkey while telling the same jokes year after year, James as a child sneaking bits of stuffing when he thought I wasn't looking, and more recently, Liam and Grace helping set the table, their faces bright with anticipation. This year will bring us back together, I whispered to myself as I basted the turkey. Food has always been our family's love language. I had no idea how wrong I would be. James and his family were supposed to arrive at 2 o'clock. By 3:30, with no call or text explaining their delay, I was checking my phone repeatedly, worried something had happened. The turkey was getting cold, the carefully timed side dishes losing their perfect doneness. When I finally heard car doors slamming in the driveway at 4, relief washed over me. They were here, they were safe, and we would still have our family Thanksgiving. "Sorry we're late," Amanda announced as she breezed through the door without waiting for me to open it. No hug, no explanation for the delay. She glanced around critically. "This place still looks exactly the same, Effie. Don't you ever think about updating those curtains? Must be from the 70s. James followed behind, eyes glued to his phone, barely looking up. "Hey, Mom," he muttered, offering a distracted half-hug that felt like an obligation. The grandchildren trailed in last. At 14, Liam had shot up several inches since I'd seen him last, his shoulders broadening in a way that reminded me painfully of James at that age. 11-year-old Grace, once so affectionate, stood awkwardly in the entryway, offering a stiff smile. "My goodness, you two have grown so much," I exclaimed, moving to embrace them. Liam stepped back, hands shoved in his pockets. Grace allowed a brief, rigid hug before quickly pulling away to check her phone. "They don't really do the hugging thing anymore, Effie," Amanda said with a smirk. "Kids these days, you know, so different from your generation." I swallowed my hurt. "Well, come in. Dinner's ready. I've been keeping it warm. I was worried something happened when you were running late." "We should have texted," James said without looking up from his phone. "Got caught up watching the game. Packers are having a great season." As I led them to the dining room, I overheard Amanda whispering to Grace, "Don't worry about eating too much. Grandma's cooking is so outdated. All that butter and salt. We'll get something else later." My step faltered, but I kept moving forward, determined not to let them see how deeply that cut. In the dining room, I'd arranged everything perfectly. The best china crystal glasses, name cards written in my most careful calligraphy, and fresh flower arrangements. "Mom, we don't need all this formality," James said, looking uncomfortable. "It's just us." "I know, sweetheart. I just wanted to make it special." I smiled, trying to hide my disappointment. Throughout dinner preparations, the interruptions were constant. Every story I tried to share about past Thanksgivings or updates on my life was cut short. "Mom, we heard that story last year," James would say, or Amanda would simply talk over me, changing the subject entirely. When I stepped into the kitchen to check on the rolls warming in the oven, Amanda followed immediately, rearranging the serving dishes I'd carefully prepared. "This is much more efficient," she declared, not asking permission to change what I'd planned. "Actually, I had a system for serving," I began. "Effie, no offense, but this kitchen setup is so inefficient. I'm just trying to help since everything seems to be taking you longer these days." The condescension in her voice was unmistakable. Back in the dining room, James contradicted nearly everything I said. When I mentioned the mild fall we'd been having, he immediately countered, "Actually, it's been colder than average, Mom. You're just forgetting." The grandchildren, when not absorbed in their devices, made comments that stunned me. When I mentioned needing their help to reach a serving dish on a high shelf, Liam snickered. Grandma's shrinking next. She'll be using one of those old people scooters. Grace giggled. And those emergency button things? Help, I've fallen and can't get up. They dissolved into laughter while James and Amanda did nothing to correct their behavior. Despite the mounting tension, I maintained my smile and continued with dinner preparations. Then Amanda brought up the subject that would cast a shadow over the entire evening. Effie, have you ever thought about whether this house is too much for you now? She asked, her tone falsely casual. My mother loves her senior living community. They have nurses on staff and everything. No maintenance worries. I carefully placed a bowl of cranberry sauce on the table. I'm managing just fine, thank you. This is my home. But after that little health scare last month, James interjected. I stiffened. That was a minor issue. The doctor said it wasn't even a real stroke, just a TIA. I'm completely recovered. Still, it's concerning, Amanda pressed. What if something happens when you're alone, this big old house, all these stairs? We worry about you. The conversation felt rehearsed, as if they'd discussed this before arriving. My suspicions were confirmed when James added, We've been looking into some nice places, actually, just to have options. As I continued bringing food to the table, my hands slightly shaking now, I tried to maintain my dignity. That's thoughtful, but unnecessary. I have no intention of leaving my home. Mom, be reasonable, James said, his voice hardening. You're not getting any younger. Over the next hour, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. As we finally sat down to eat, I realized none of them seemed particularly hungry. Let's say grace before we begin, I suggested, reaching for James's hand as we had always done. Amanda cut in before anyone could respond. We're not really doing the prayer thing anymore, Effie. The kids find it uncomfortable. I withdrew my outstretched hand, another family tradition casually discarded. I see. Well, let's just enjoy the meal then. As plates were reluctantly filled, Amanda took a small bite of mashed potatoes and made a face. These are so heavy. You really should try my cauliflower mash recipe. No carbs and so much healthier. James nodded in agreement. Mom's cooking is pretty old school. All these rich foods aren't really what we eat nowadays. Is that why you're not eating much? I asked, noticing their barely touched plates. I made all your favorites. An awkward glance passed between James and Amanda. Well, actually, Amanda said with a tight smile. We had a late lunch before coming over. The kids were hungry, and we weren't sure what time we'd actually eat here. The revelation that they had eaten before arriving for Thanksgiving dinner, the meal I'd spent days preparing, felt like a physical blow. Liam and Grace didn't even attempt to hide their disinterest in the food, pushing it around their plates without taking more than a bite or two. Grandma, this stuffing tastes weird, Grace announced, scrunching her nose. It's Grandpa's recipe, I said quietly. It was always his favorite part of Thanksgiving. Well, he had strange taste, Liam muttered, earning a snort of laughter from his sister. As the meal progressed, the conversation took an even more disturbing turn. Mom, I've been meaning to talk to you about your finances, James said suddenly. I set down my fork. My finances are just fine, James. Are they because your spending lately seems concerning? What spending are you referring to? Amanda jumped in. The trips to see your sister in Florida, the new television, the donations to that animal shelter. It adds up, Effie. I stared at them in disbelief. How do you know about those purchases? James shifted uncomfortably. I've been keeping an eye on your accounts. As your son, I need to make sure you're not being taken advantage of. You've been monitoring my bank accounts. The invasion of privacy was shocking. It's for your own good, Amanda insisted. People take advantage of seniors all the time. I am perfectly capable of managing my own money, I said firmly. And those concerning expenditures were my choice. The trips to see Martha keep me connected to family. The TV replaced one that was 15 years old, and I've always supported animal charities. James leaned forward, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. Mom, you need to think about the future. What about our inheritance? The grandkids' college funds? The real agenda was becoming clear. This wasn't about concern for my well-being. This was about my assets. Your inheritance, I repeated, my voice steady, despite my rising anger. Thomas and I worked our entire lives to build what we have. We always intended to help with the grandchildren's education, but that doesn't mean you're entitled to monitor how I spend my own money now. Amanda's face hardened. You're being selfish, Effie. Family wealth is supposed to be preserved and passed down. You're just wasting it. Wasting it on what? Living my life. I could feel heat rising in my cheeks. James and Amanda exchanged a meaningful look, and I realized, with a sinking heart, that this conversation had been planned all along. The thing is, Mom, James said slowly, with your health concerns, the house being too much to maintain, and our worries about your judgment lately, we think it might be time to discuss power of attorney. The words hung in the air like a physical threat. They wanted control of my life, my home, my finances, everything. Absolutely not, I said, my voice low but firm. I had one minor TIA that resolved completely. My doctor says I'm in excellent health for my age. For your age exactly, Amanda pounced. You can't expect to manage everything forever. The nursing homes we've looked at. Nursing homes, you've been shopping for nursing homes for me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Senior living communities, James corrected, as if the terminology somehow made it better. Places where you'd have companionship activities, healthcare when needed. And where you could sell this house and put the money somewhere safe. I finished for him. Somewhere you control. James's face flushed with anger. You're being paranoid and difficult. This is exactly why we're concerned. The tension in the room was unbearable. My carefully prepared Thanksgiving dinner, meant to bring us together, had become the setting for an ambush. The golden brown turkey sat in the center of the table, barely touched, a symbol of all my wasted efforts. I had spent hours basting it to perfection, just as Thomas had taught me decades ago. Looking at my family's faces, James's frustration, Amanda's cold calculation, the grandchildren's complete disinterest, something finally broke inside me. I have done everything I could for this family, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I helped you buy your first car, James. I paid for your wedding. I gave you $75,000 for your business without asking for repayment. I've paid $24,000 a year for the children's education. And this is how you repay that love, by plotting to take control of my life. The room fell silent. Then Amanda spoke, her voice dripping with condescension. Playing the martyr doesn't suit you, Effie. Everything you did was just what parents are supposed to do. Nobody owes you for fulfilling your obligations. I looked at my son, hoping he would defend me, but he was nodding along with his wife's cruel words. James, I said softly. Is that how you feel too? That the love and support I've given was just an obligation that deserves no respect in return? Something in James snapped. He shoved his chair back from the table, standing so abruptly that his water glass toppled over, spreading across the white tablecloth like a stain. For God's sake, Mom, stop making this so difficult. You're getting old. You can't live alone in this big house anymore. You need to be practical and stop being so damn stubborn about everything. I remained seated, looking up at my son, towering over me. This is my home, James. I'm not leaving it because it's convenient for you financially. What happened next will be burned into my memory forever. James's face contorted with a rage I'd never seen before. In one swift movement, he grabbed the platter with the 20-pound turkey and hurled it directly at me. "Go back to the nursing home, you useless old woman!" he shouted as the bird flew through the air. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the turkey, the one I'd woken at dawn to prepare the centerpiece of our family tradition, sailing toward me. I felt the impact as it hit my chest and slid down onto my lap, gravy and stuffing splattering across my best dress, the one I'd carefully chosen for this special day. Hot grease soaked through the fabric, burning my skin. Silence descended upon the room. Gravy dripped from my hair onto my shoulders. A piece of stuffing slid down my cheek like a tear. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't even process what had just happened. Amanda's face showed no shock, only a slight smirk of satisfaction. The children stared wide-eyed. Grace's hand over her mouth, Liam frozen halfway between sitting and standing. No one moved to help me. No one offered a napkin or an apology. The family I had loved and nurtured for decades watched as I sat covered in the physical evidence of their contempt. After what felt like an eternity, James broke the silence. "This is exactly why you can't manage on your own anymore. You provoke situations and then play the victim." I still couldn't speak. How had my son become this person? Where was the little boy who had once made me Mother's Day cards declaring me the best mom in the universe? "We should go," Amanda announced, standing and gathering her purse. "Clearly, Effie isn't in a rational state to discuss important matters. We'll talk when you're more reasonable," she added, looking at me as if I were a misbehaving child. The children followed their parents without a backward glance. No goodbye, no help cleaning up, no acknowledgement of what had just occurred. "Think about what we said, Mom," James called over his shoulder as they headed for the door. "We'll start touring places next week. This tantrum just proves our point." The front door slammed, and I was alone. Turkey gravy and cranberry sauce dripped onto the dining room floor. The beautiful table I had set with such care was ruined, but it was my heart that had taken the worst damage. I finally moved mechanically, picking bits of food off my dress and hair. Tears began to flow freely now that no one was there to witness them. I sobbed, as I hadn't since Thomas died, great heaving cries that seemed to come from the depths of my soul. Hours later, exhausted from crying, I sat in my darkened living room, still wearing my food-stained clothes. The house that had always been my sanctuary now felt tainted, as if the walls themselves had witnessed my humiliation and could never unsee it. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over each time, feeling the sting of the turkey hitting me, hearing my son's cruel words echo in my mind. By morning, something had changed inside me. The shock and hurt were still there, but alongside them was something new, resolve. The day after Thanksgiving dawned cold and gray, matching my mood perfectly. I moved through the house like a ghost, mechanically cleaning up the disaster in the dining room. Each piece of turkey I picked up from the floor. Each gravy stain I scrubbed from the carpet strengthened my determination. This would not be my life anymore. Initially, depression threatened to overwhelm me. I sat in Thomas's old armchair, wondering if I should simply give in to their demands. Maybe they were right. Maybe at 67, I was too old to make my own decisions. The doubt crept in like a poison. But as I looked around at the home Thomas and I had built together, at the photographs chronicling our family's history, I began to see the pattern that had been developing right before my eyes. The concerned comments about my health, the helpful suggestions about senior living, the increasing attempts to control my finances. The disrespect had been building for years, and I had been making excuses for it, unwilling to see my son for what he had become. That afternoon, I called my friend Susan, who had been widowed 2 years before me. "Can I come over?" I need perspective from someone who understands. An hour later, sitting in Susan's cozy kitchen with a cup of tea growing cold between my hands, I recounted the entire Thanksgiving disaster. Susan's face grew increasingly troubled as I spoke. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hands in hers. Effie, what you're describing isn't just family tension. It's elder abuse and financial exploitation. Your son threw food at you and called you useless. That's assault, honey. Abuse. The word felt foreign when applied to my situation. But James is my son. He's just worried about me. Is he worried about you or about your money? Susan asked bluntly. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like a calculated effort to get control of your assets. Her words hit me with the force of truth. I remembered James's anger when I mentioned the unpaid loan, Amanda's comments about wasting their inheritance, the snooping into my financial accounts. What should I do? I asked, feeling lost. First, you protect yourself and your assets. Tomorrow morning, we're going to see Henry. Henry Watson had been our family lawyer for decades, handling Thomas's will and all our legal matters. The next morning, I sat in his office, still feeling slightly numb, as I recounted the Thanksgiving incident and the events leading up to it. Henry's normally jovial face was serious as he listened. Effie, I'm disturbed by what you're telling me. Let's review your financial situation immediately. What we discovered confirmed my worst fears. James had indeed added himself as a co-owner to one of my checking accounts, the one where my pension was deposited monthly. There had been several large withdrawals in recent months that I hadn't authorized. He had also been calling my insurance agent asking detailed questions about my life insurance policy. This is textbook financial exploitation, Henry said grimly. And the physical incident with the turkey coupled with the verbal abuse gives me serious concerns about your safety. What are my options? I asked, my voice stronger than I expected. You need to secure your assets immediately. We'll remove James from any accounts, change passwords, and set up new accounts if necessary. I also suggest you reconsider your will and power of attorney designations. And the house? I asked, thinking of the home that James and Amanda were so eager to sell. Henry leaned back in his chair. That's entirely your decision, Effie. But if you're asking my personal opinion, I think removing yourself from this toxic situation might be the healthiest choice. You're only 67 in good health, despite that minor TIA, and financially secure. You have options. As I left Henry's office, a plan was already forming in my mind. My sister Martha had been begging me to move to Florida near her for years. The sunshine would do you good, she always said during our weekly calls. And the community here is wonderful for active seniors. I had always dismissed the idea, unwilling to leave the home where Thomas and I had built our lives, unwilling to be far from James and the grandchildren. But now the distance seemed like a blessing rather than a sacrifice. Over the next few days, I moved with quiet determination. I contacted a trusted real estate agent, Mary, who had helped several of my friends downsize over the years. The market is hot right now, she told me after walking through the house. With the location and the condition of this property, we could list well above what you might expect. I don't want to list it, I said firmly. I want a private cash sale, as quickly as possible to a buyer who will appreciate a family home. Mary raised her eyebrows but nodded. I have a few clients who have been looking for exactly this kind of property. Let me make some calls. While Mary worked on finding a buyer, I began the emotional process of sorting through a lifetime of possessions. Susan came over daily, helping me categorize everything into what to keep, what to sell, and what to donate. Are you sure you want to do this without telling James? She asked one afternoon as we boxed up kitchen items. I'm sure, I said, carefully wrapping Thomas's favorite coffee mug to take with me. If I tell him, he'll try to stop me or manipulate me into changing my mind. This needs to be my decision made without pressure. In my heart, I was finding strength I didn't know I possessed. The shock and hurt were still there, but they were being channeled into action rather than paralysis. I was reclaiming control of my life, one decision at a time. During those 3 weeks of preparation, James called several times, his messages growing increasingly demanding. "Mom, we need to talk about the nursing home options. I've scheduled tours for next week." "Mom, why haven't you returned my calls? This is important." "Mom, Amanda and I are coming over tomorrow to discuss the power of attorney paperwork." I responded minimally, buying time. "I'm not feeling well today. Can we postpone?" "I have plans with Susan. Let's talk next week." Each excuse gave me more time to solidify my plans. When James did stop by unannounced one afternoon, I maintained a calm facade. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told him, revealing nothing of my true intentions. "I understand your concerns." James seemed pleased by my apparent compliance. "That's great, Mom. I found 3 facilities I think you'll really like, and I've already spoken to a realtor about getting the house ready to sell." My stomach clenched at his presumption, but I kept my expression neutral. "We'll discuss it soon." I promised, knowing soon would have an entirely different meaning than what he assumed. Meanwhile, Mary had found the perfect buyers. A young couple expecting their first child, eager for a family home with history and character. They offered $50,000 above my asking price, with a quick closing and minimal contingencies. "They love the house," Mary assured me. "They're going to raise their family here just like you and Thomas did." That brought me a measure of peace. The house would continue to be a home filled with love and new memories. With Henry's help, I created a new will, removing James as executor and beneficiary. Instead, I established trusts for Liam and Grace that would become available when they turned 25, overseen by a trustee who wasn't James or Amanda. I opened new accounts at a different bank, transferred my assets, and made arrangements to have my mail forwarded to a P.O. box temporarily. Martha helped me find a lovely condo in her beachside community in Florida. A bright open space with no stairs, a community pool, and activities for active seniors. "You'll love it here, Effie," she assured me during our nightly calls. "It's a fresh start." I hired movers to pack and ship the possessions I was keeping. Family photos, Thomas's favorite chair, my mother's china that had survived the Thanksgiving disaster, and other irreplaceable mementos. Despite everything, I carefully packed items for Liam and Grace. Heirloom jewelry, their grandfather's pocket watch, albums of their baby photos. Things I hoped they would value someday, when they were old enough to understand. The night before my departure, I walked through each room of the empty house, saying goodbye to the space where I had lived so much of my life. In the master bedroom, I ran my hand over the wall where we had marked James's height each year. In the kitchen, I stood in the spot where Thomas always stood to carve the turkey on Thanksgiving. In the living room, I remembered Christmas mornings and family game nights. "It's time to let go," I whispered to myself. "Time for a new chapter." The next morning, I signed the final paperwork transferring ownership of the house to the young couple. Mary handed me a cashier's check, the proceeds from the sale after paying off the minimal remaining mortgage. "Are you sure about this, Effie?" she asked gently. "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied, tucking the check into my purse. I left a single letter on the kitchen counter, the only space James would be sure to check when he eventually came looking for me. It was brief, factual, with no accusations or recriminations. "James, I have sold the house and moved. The new owners take possession immediately. I am safe and well. I will contact you when I'm settled. Mom." No dramatic confrontation, no tearful goodbyes. Just a quiet exit from a home that had become a battleground. As my taxi pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. My suitcase contained everything I needed for my new life, and a plane ticket to Florida marked my path forward. The Florida sunshine felt like a promise as I stepped off the plane. Martha was waiting at the arrival gate, her familiar face breaking into a wide smile when she spotted me. Welcome to your new life, she said, embracing me tightly. I'm so proud of you, Effie. My new condo exceeded my expectations, bright and airy with a small balcony overlooking a garden courtyard. The community was designed for independent seniors with walking paths, a clubhouse, and organized activities, but without the institutional feel of the nursing homes James had been researching. This doesn't feel like giving up, I remarked to Martha as we arranged furniture in my new living room. It feels like choosing myself. The first week passed in a blur of unpacking, exploring the neighborhood, and meeting neighbors. I discovered a coffee shop within walking distance where the baristas quickly learned my name and order. I found a bookstore with a weekly reading group. I met other widows and widowers who understood the journey I'd been on. On my 7th day in Florida, my phone rang with James's number. I had been expecting this call since he would have discovered the empty house by now. Taking a deep breath, I answered. Mom? His voice was a mixture of anger and panic. What the hell is going on? Where are you? The house is empty and there are strangers living in it. Hello, James, I said calmly. As my note explained, I sold the house and moved. Without telling me, without discussing it. How could you do this? His voice rose in volume. And what do you mean you sold it? That house was part of our family inheritance. The house was mine to sell, James, just as my life is mine to live. Where are you? What have you done with the money? The naked concern about finances rather than my well-being was telling. I'm safe and comfortable. The proceeds from the house are secured in investments for my future needs. This is insane. You can't just make these kinds of decisions without family input. Amanda and I were trying to help you. You need supervision, especially after pulling a stunt like this. I let his tirade wash over me without emotional response. When he finally paused for breath, I spoke quietly but firmly. James, I respected your wish for me to leave. You made it very clear on Thanksgiving when you threw a turkey at me and called me a useless old woman that you wanted me gone. So I removed myself from the situation. That's not fair. I was frustrated because you wouldn't listen to reason. Throwing food at someone and verbally abusing them is never reasonable, son, nor is attempting to gain control of their finances without consent. What are you talking about? I was trying to protect you. You removed $75,000 from my account over the past year. Money I never authorized you to take. That's not protection, James. That's theft. His silence confirmed what I already knew. I'm not pressing charges, I continued, but I am establishing boundaries. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it will be on new terms. I am not infirm, incompetent, or in need of management. I am your mother, and I deserve respect. The conversation ended with James alternating between anger and attempts at manipulation. Amanda left several voicemails afterward, her messages ranging from outrage to thinly veiled threats about legal action for elder incompetence. I saved them all, but responded to none. As weeks passed, I settled into my new community and discovered parts of myself that had been dormant for years. I joined a water aerobics class at the community pool, volunteered at the local hospital, where my nursing experience was valued, and even took a painting class, something I'd always wanted to try but never made time for. Martha introduced me to her circle of friends, active retirees, who went on day trips to museums, attended concerts in the park, and hosted dinner parties where no one questioned my competence or commented on my age. I found myself laughing more than I had in years. 2 months after my move, Liam sent me a text message, the first contact from either grandchild. Grandma, are you okay? Dad says you had some kind of breakdown. I called him immediately, relieved that at least one family member was showing genuine concern. Our conversation was awkward at first, but gradually warmed as I explained my side of the story without vilifying his parents. That sounds really bad, what happened at Thanksgiving, he said finally. I didn't know Dad did that with the turkey. He told us you got upset and asked us all to leave. There were mistakes on both sides. I said, unwilling to drive a wedge between Liam and his father. But I needed to make a change for my own well-being. "Do you like Florida?" he asked, his voice sounding younger than his 14 years. "I do. It's beautiful here. There's a spot on the beach where dolphins swim by almost every morning." "That sounds cool. Maybe I could visit sometime if that's okay." My heart swelled. My heart. "I would love that, Liam. Anytime." That call was the first tentative step toward rebuilding connections with my grandchildren on more authentic terms. Grace eventually followed her brother's lead, calling occasionally and even sending me drawings she'd made in art class. James took longer. 3 months of silence passed before he called again, his tone less demanding. "The house sold for well above market value," he said, an oblique acknowledgement that I had made a sound financial decision. "Yes, it did," I agreed, offering nothing more. Another pause. "The new owners seem nice. They're expecting a baby in June. I'm glad the house will have children in it again." "Mom," his voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry about Thanksgiving. I was out of line." It wasn't a complete apology, but it was a start. "Yes, you were," I said simply. "Things haven't been the same without you," he admitted. "The kids miss you." "I miss them too. They're welcome to visit any time. You and Amanda as well, under certain conditions." "Conditions?" The old defensiveness crept back into his voice. "Respect James. Basic courtesy and respect. That's my only condition." The first holiday season apart was difficult but liberating. Instead of exhausting myself cooking a meal that wouldn't be appreciated, I joined Martha and friends for Thanksgiving at a beachside restaurant. For Christmas, I donated to charities in the grandchildren's names and sent them carefully chosen gifts that reflected their interests rather than my nostalgia. As the 1-year anniversary of my move approached, I reflected on how much had changed. The hurt of that terrible Thanksgiving had faded, replaced by the quiet confidence that comes from standing up for oneself. James and I had established a cautious new relationship, not as close as before, but more honest. He had repaid a portion of the money he had taken, and I had chosen to forgive the rest as the price of moving forward. The most profound change was within myself. I was no longer defining my worth through my role as mother and grandmother. I had friends, interests, and purpose that were entirely my own. The woman who had sat shell-shocked with gravy dripping down her face had transformed into someone stronger, more self-assured, and surprisingly happier. My story isn't about revenge, though some might see it that way. It's about recognizing when relationships have become harmful rather than nurturing. It's about having the courage to start over, no matter your age. It's about understanding that love doesn't require martyrdom. If you're facing disrespect or exploitation from family members, know that you deserve better. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for your well-being and ultimately healthier for all involved. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect yourself from family members who are causing harm? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please, like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience, and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Remember, it's never too late to write a new chapter in your life story. Thank you for listening, and may you find the strength to stand up for yourself when needed.